interactions with our MPs, where is the threshold when it comes to perhaps potential intimidation? The reason I am asking this question is because pro-Palestine protesters now, they have started targeting the offices of various MPs. And if you listened to people doing the rounds at the weekend, they also said apparently that some of these protesters have started targeting MPs' homes as well. A lot of this is all to do with how people voted on the calls for the ceasefire in Gaza, or perhaps even abstained from voting. I mean, I can show you the constituency office right now, where we've had apparently the word murderer daubed on there. We've had blood on their hands stuck on these windows and offices and all the rest of it. Here you can see protesters doing what protesters do, protesting. I have to say, yeah, this is apparently outside of Keir Starmer's office. I've got to say, I need to be clear here, there's been a lot of reports about protesters targeting the homes of MPs. I can't find any evidence of that. I'm not suggesting it didn't happen, but I've scoured high and low to see people outside of homes of MPs. I can't find that. That's Jo Stevens' office. She's the Shadow Secretary for Wales. She abstained from that vote, and you can see the word murderer on the screen, and a lot of pictures as well, saying you've got blood on your hands. Quentin, what do you make to all of this?
The only time I can remember an MP's home being targeted was immediately after the Brexit vote, and Boris Johnson's house was circled by people who were very cross. I am very much of the right to protest side of things. However, if people start attacking or being aggressive towards MPs' families, that strikes me as quite wrong. But generally, politics is not for shrivellers. And if you can't put up with some protesters outside your door, particularly at a time when things are getting pretty hairy, then I think you probably shouldn't be in politics. So, on the whole, I am on the right of the side of the protesters and their right to protest. However, it should never get menacing. It should not become intimidating, and they should not cross the law in terms of.
Do you think that was intimidating in that office that I just showed you there, Jo Stevens, when you've got all this red paint, you've got blood on your hands sign, you've got murderer written on you? Is that intimidating?
I think it's calling Jo Stevens a murderer is plainly that would be crossing the line for me. But protesting outside Sir Keir Starmer's office looked fine to me.
Peter?
Yeah, I think it's about public and private and about intimidation. So I think you shouldn't turn up at an MP's house. I think that definitely crosses the line because there's no reason for you to go there. 99% of them, other than those who've already been attacked, have offices that are publicly available. I've been involved in peaceful protest as a trade union member in the past, and you can do that in a civil way, in a public place. And Quentin used the word intimidation, which is right. I think that's where the line is. So clearly at Jo Stevens' office, graffiti, well, that's a criminal offence, so by definition that is wrong. But I think if you're making someone feel unsafe, and you don't have to touch them to do that, if you make them feel unsafe, that in many instances is a criminal offence anyway.
That's a slippery slope, though, because if your definition is if you make someone feel unsafe, like, that is quite a kind of subjective thing, isn't it? I could say to you, you know, you're sitting quite close to me, you're making me feel unsafe. You could say, well, I'm not doing anything wrong, I'm just sat there. So that is quite a blurred line, isn't it?
But that's where the law is, that's not my line. There are things like common assault and public order offences. You don't have to lay your hand upon someone to cross the line legally. And I think some of what we've seen, so again, if you're standing there with a placard in a public place, I think that's OK. Your MP might not like it. If you're screaming goodness knows what at them, that probably crosses a line. If you're chucking paint on their door, it definitely does.
Yeah, and
I'm also wary, though. I'm also wary of giving the police any excuse to move people on. That, to me, that's the police starting to make decisions for themselves. And, you know, there have been stories about silent vigils outside abortion clinics. Now, I'm not saying which side of the argument I'm on here, but when silent protesters are being moved on, it strikes me as the police going too far.
But that's to do, what you're on about there, that is to do with exclusion zones.
Yeah, I don't like exclusion zones. I think that's wrong.
But Quentin, haven't you got to balance that against the medical need? Because by definition, if you're an abortion clinic, you're going through a distressing period. A distressing time.
Yes, indeed. But I just think I think the right to protest is very important.
Yeah, but hang on. So I'm going off topic slightly, but it's relevant to your point. So if your wife had found out that she was pregnant, and very, very, very tragically, the child was, you found out with scans and whatever tests, whatever, that child was, I don't know, had a very life-limiting disease or whatever that situation is. So you as a family had to make that incredibly traumatic decision to have a medical abortion for reasons of the child's well-being. Would you then want some random, as you make your way to that clinic, standing there, judging you, adding pressure to your horrendous time because it goes against their religious belief?
Well, judgment happens. Judgment is part of the way the world works.
Yeah, but you'd want to be protected from it.
But if it's a silent vigil, I don't think it should be stopped. And also, I think it's wrong. I mean, I don't think the GB News has done this, but any idea that this is new, that the intimidation or the protests outside people's offices, MPs' offices, and attacks on MPs' offices is new, that's not right, because Peter Bone, who's got his own problems at the moment, MP for Wellingborough, his office has been attacked numerous times since Brexit, so and has had windows broken. So, this is a tricky issue to be too sure on either side.
See, I would throw this open to, if anyone out there can find me any I don't want to sound awful or anything, but any proof, actually, that MPs' homes have been targeted, because I have scoured. That's what I dedicated.
Downing Street is most nights.
Yeah, but Downing Street is not really, which MPs have had their homes targeted? Because people, Rachel Reeves, for example, was very clearly saying it had happened at the weekend. I just can't find any evidence of it. And in this day and age, when everyone's a paparazzi in their own phone, it's odd that there is no evidence of that. Maybe I've missed it. Maybe I didn't dig too hard. You tell me. Now, what about, for example, what the Green Party are doing? I don't know if you saw, I'll get it up on the screen actually, because they did like a tweet campaign where they were publishing, and it's public knowledge anyway, so they're not declaring anything that's a secret, but they're putting up what I would call attack ads saying every MP that failed to vote for an end to the killing in Gaza. And then they've listed each and every single one of them. Now, the reason this pricks up my...
money.
Well, it's not about the money for me. There's a very serious thing. David Amess was killed, right, the MP. Now, let's all remind ourselves, he was killed not that long ago, and he was killed 2021. He was killed by a man that when he was in court, he said, the murderer said, I killed this MP because of the way that he voted on airstrikes in Syria. Now, when you've got that kind of attack and you've got that kind of motive, why a political party would seek to kind of to do this is beyond me. What do you think the motive is there?
Well, the motive is to illustrate their argument and say that these people are on the record. But all you need to do is just look at Hansard online, and you can see this a complete waste of money by the Green Party. They're trying to desperately sort of seeking for publicity, I suppose. Yeah,
I know that voting records are public, but to me it seems I know that, and that's right. But what I'm saying is to go out of your way to create this ad to say that they all voted, they failed to vote for an end to the killing in Gaza. That is quite inflammatory language, because most people in the land that have got an inch of empathy and compassion want the killing in Gaza to stop. Who would not want the killing of innocent people to stop immediately? Saying, though, that you don't think perhaps the most effective way to achieve that is an immediate ceasefire right now is a very different thing. And that's why I just find this kind of Green Party ad a little bit peculiar.
I think you're quite nuanced in your language, and you're right to be so. I mean, I wouldn't have done it like that. I don't think the Green Party are intent on violence, quite the opposite. But we know there's a tiny minority of people who are not rational and not sane, and two MPs have been murdered, and Sir Stephen Timms suffered and survived a terrible attack many years ago. I think the Green Party could have found a different way to make the same point, perhaps.
Yeah, it's very subjective language, and just, I mean, the wording of the advert is pretty dodgy, but the principle of pointing out how MPs have voted seems to me a perfectly fair one.
Yeah, and I'm sure obviously the Green Party are not here to respond to that, and I'm sure that they would feel very justified in what they were doing. They are very passionate about calling for a ceasefire now. Now, moving on from that, one of the things that I find interesting is the double standards in politics, because it wasn't that long ago that Rishi Sunak had his home violated, I would say, in a completely unacceptable way. You had Greenpeace protesters trampling all over his family lawn to unfold that. I think it was black fabric or whatever it was. I thought that was an absolute disgrace. I don't know who you think you are, but the same people that are now talking about, protecting MPs and lines and all the rest of it, lots of those people were probably in support of Rishi Sunak's back garden getting protested by Those lot wanting no oil and gas.
Michelle, I have to break it to you. Double
What?
standards is not unknown in politics. And you're absolutely right. I mean, you're absolutely right in what you say. But, you know, that's the nature of the game. Blatant hypocrisy is absolutely rampant in politics. I thought that story about when Mr Sunak's house was invaded showed pathetic security by the police, you know, sort of bungling North Yorkshire police. But, yeah, you're right. You're right, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I do find it odd how some of these things do happen, because apparently you've got all this security everywhere, and then apparently it can be breached in very simple ways, so it would appear. What about double standards?
Yeah, I mean, jumping on Rishi Sunak's roof, I think that was just stop oil, wasn't it? To me, it's certainly a police...
I thought it was Greenpeace, but
OK,
I'm correct.
No, I'll take your word for it. But whoever did it, I remember they offered the justification of, well, we thought it was OK because we knew Rishi Sunak and his family on holiday. I don't think so. I think it's a crime to jump on someone's roof like that, because you're trying to intimidate them, and it's not up to the protesters to set the rules about when it's OK to jump on someone's roof. But yeah, there's this other point about how did they manage to do it when the Prime Minister should be the most guarded person in the whole country.
There is the million-dollar question, isn't it, everybody else?